What's up, Haven family? Welcome to Dive Deeper, where we're going to be taking just a little closer look into some of the passages that we've been covering at our gatherings. As a lot of you know, a lot of you that maybe have read the Bible, even if you haven't read it much, I'm sure that you've noticed that no matter how much we read it and how much time we try to spend and dedicate to things, that there's always more that we can get. So I want to just take this time to just break down a couple verses that we talked about last Monday so that we can just really start to get some more out of this passage because it is just full of imagery. So we kicked off the semester on Monday talking about Jesus being our good shepherd. And so we're going to be looking this semester at what does it mean for us to be the sheep and what does it mean for Jesus to be our good shepherd? And so we read through John chapter 10 and we broke down some different ways that we can start to hear God's voice and get aligned with his way of living and get into fellowship with the rest of the flock. Like we are going to be focusing on these all semester long, and I am so excited. But today I want to just take a small break and I want to start to look at a couple of verses in John chapter 10. I want to look at John chapter 10 verses 9 and 10. And I want to see the imagery this here because I really don't want us to miss it. What it says in verse 9 is this. Jesus says, "I am the door, and if anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy, but I came that you may have life and have it abundantly." I mean, this is powerful here. And so I just want to just take a really slow look through it. And I want to start to see what is some of the imagery that he's putting into this and how can we learn from it. So the first thing that we see that Jesus says is, "I am the door." Now, Jesus saying that he is the door is actually one of 7 I am statements in the book of John. There's some other statements like when Jesus says, "I am the bread of life," or "I am the light of the world." One of the famous ones is when he says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." And even when he says, "I'm the good shepherd." And what we see in these is not only Jesus pointing to different pieces of his character, but that he is specifically pointing to his deity and the fact that he is the Son of God. And so what I want us to look at here is that he's not just pointing to something about himself, but he is saying he is God. And here's how we can tell. Is because he says, "I am the door, and if anyone enters by me, he will be saved." So again, this is kind of like what he says in other I am statements. When he says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one gets to the Father except through me." This is another one of those statements. And what people would have realized at the time is that the doors on these sheepfolds, there were a couple different ways that they operated. One of them, if it was a bigger sheepfold, it would have a door on it that a shepherd would actually stand guard at. And he would make sure that only the people who were supposed to be coming in and only the sheep that belonged to that sheepfold would be let in the door. But then also there were sheepfolds where the shepherd would actually act as the door. And again, that's what it seems like Jesus is referring to here. He's saying, "I am the door." And on these sheepfolds, there would be just an opening and a doorway for the sheep to be able to go in. And a lot of times the shepherd would just lay in that doorway and they would guard it. They would make sure that the sheep were safe inside, and they would keep watch for any predators or anything that would try to take any of those sheep. So what we see Jesus is saying is that not only is he the only one that can save us, but that he's saying once he saves us, he is protecting us from the power of the enemy, from the evil one, and from the penalty of sin. And so what I see here is that he's saying, "I'm the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved." But then look what it says next. It says, "Then he will go in and out and find pasture." Now, what some people think is that this in and out is talking about salvation. That is saying like, oh, well, sometimes you'll maybe go in by Jesus and you'll be saved, but then there's people who will walk out and they won't. But I don't know if that's exactly what Jesus is talking about here. I actually think there's even something a little bit deeper, because what it says is that they'll go out and find pasture. And there's other translations that even say go out and find green pastures. So if they were going out and they were losing their salvation, I don't think they would be finding green pastures in this picture. So we say, okay, so then what does it mean that people will be going in and out by Jesus as the door? So the first thing I want to look at is when he says they will go in. When they go in, I see this as interior union with the shepherd, an interior union with Jesus. It is where we are made right with God. It is where we find safety from harm. Again, safety from the enemy and from the penalty of sin. And it is the secret place of the Most High. So I think that's what Jesus is saying, is when we enter into the sheepfold through him, then we will be in our interior secret place with the Most High. This is where we grow closer in relationship with him. This is where we start to learn more about him and we start to hear his voice. This is when we are in that going in phase. Then it also says that you will go out, and there's other translations that say you'll go freely. And so what we see here, I think what Jesus is just trying to paint the picture of is that this is when we go out and we work in obedience in what God has called us to do. This is when we actually are going out and making disciples like the Great Commission tells us to. When we are going into our workplaces, in our families, in our homes, like in our schools, this is actually the going out. And it's not because we're going out of relationship with Jesus, but that is we're stepping out into the world and into the calling that he has for us. Because what we realize is that God isn't just calling us to sit at home and just sit in our prayer closet and only ever be in the inn, but that he is calling us out into the world to make an impact for his kingdom. So this is where we see that we are led to nourishment. Again, it says we're led to green pastures. We can get into church and different groups. We're interacting with other believers. Like, this is where we're going to get nourishment. It's also where we can start to interact with the world without fear of danger. Because from before, if we were out in the world, again, like we talked about on Monday, we don't have the wisdom and ability to be able to always be able to tell what is dangerous, what's going to be harmful. And when we go out with the shepherd is when we can go out in peace. And I think that that's what the Bible is talking about when it says, I want you to be in the world, but not of the world. We're not called to stay out of the world. We are called to be in it, but Jesus being our shepherd in this area and in this going freely is where we can actually go and be in the world and not of the world. So again, here's this amazing picture. Jesus as the door, the way to salvation. And that he's saying that if we enter in through him, then we will be safe. We will be protected from the penalty of sin. But that we won't just stop there, but that then he will actually lead us out of the sheepfold, out into the world to be able to get nourishment, but also to be able to bring more sheep into the sheepfold. But I want to close with this, because this is what it says in verse 10. It says, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy, but I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. So if right now you are in a season or you are in a part of life where you feel like you do not have an abundant life, things are really difficult, things are stressful, you're feeling a lot of anxiety or depression, you're feeling like you can barely make it to work or make it through your day, what I want to challenge us to do this week is to start to see Jesus as the door and to enter through the gate, to enter through Jesus. Because what he's saying is that he did not design us to have to go through life and just stumble through, barely make it, holding on by a thread, like just our emotions and everything just pulling us every which way. He created us to live an abundant life. And abundant doesn't always mean that we have a ton of resources or that we always get the job we want or we always have a perfect marriage, but that what he's saying is that when we will enter through him, when we will allow him to be our shepherd, to stand at the door of our gate of our lives and make sure that we are saying we are trusting in you for protection, trusting in you for security. And that also when we go out into the world, we say, I'm not just trying to get what I want, but God, I'm actually putting you first. That is what leads to an abundant life. A peace that's beyond our understanding, a boldness that we don't normally have. This is when we start to actually tap into the power of the Spirit. So what I want to challenge you with this week is this. Will you enter through the gate? Will you enter through the gate and allow Jesus to be the shepherd that we trust and believe that he can be better than anyone else? Blessings to you. We'll see you on Monday.